Friend ignored a warning sign of danger, then blamed me for not preventing her A-sault even though I had tried to keep her safe. A year ago, I met up with my friend Miranda, 23F, for a casual dinner. Halfway through our evening, she mentioned that after we ate, she planned on heading to a house party to see this guy she'd been chatting with on Tinder for about 2 weeks. Immediately, alarm bells went off in my head. The guy lived in a different city, an hour's drive away, so she'd be in a completely unfamiliar environment, late at night, surrounded by strangers. I told her straight up that I didn't think this was a good idea, it sounded dangerous. But Miranda was determined. She really wanted to hook up with this guy, and no matter how many times I tried to talk her out of it, she was firm. If I didn't go with her, she'd just go alone. Going to this house party was the absolute last thing I wanted to do. I had work early the next morning, hated the idea of a long drive there and back, and honestly, that party scene just didn't appeal to me anymore. Still, I was worried about Miranda, so I reluctantly agreed to drive her, but only under 2 conditions. First, that we stay for only half an hour, just long enough for her to say hi and see the guy, and second, that we bring another friend along for some extra security. She agreed, so I felt a little better about the situation. Later that night, we picked up our friend Katie, 23F, and made the hour-long drive out to the Tinder guy's house. The second we stepped inside, I realized something was very off. It wasn't a house party at all. It was just the Tinder guy and 2 of his male friends, lounging on a couch, drinking and getting high. Immediately, Katie and I exchanged nervous glances. We were both really uncomfortable. This definitely wasn't the crowded party we'd been expecting, where we could slip in and out, unnoticed. We made it clear to Miranda that we wanted to leave. But she brushed off our worries. We already drove all this way, just hang out for a little while, she insisted. Miranda was absolutely beaming, so eager to spend time with this guy, and she swore up and down we'd only stay for half an hour. Of course, half an hour turned into 1, and then 2. Miranda kept disappearing with Tinder guy, leaving Katie and me alone in the living room with his friends. Every time we approached her to leave, she'd beg us to stay just a little longer, pleading, "Please, can you just do this once for me? Or I already ordered food, we can just go after it arrives." When Katie and I told her again how deeply uncomfortable we were, Miranda's answer was just to suggest that all of us hang out together in the living room. I could feel anger and frustration rising in me as Miranda completely ignored my and Katie's concerns for our safety. What made everything even worse was how Miranda started pushing Tinder guy's friend to sit closer to me, even asking for my number. She knew I was in a relationship, knew I was anxious and uneasy in that space, and yet she kept dismissing my boundaries as if they didn't matter. At about the 2.5-hour mark, I just couldn't take it anymore. The constant racist and sexually harassing remarks from Tinder guy and his friends had crossed every line. For context, Miranda, Katie, and I are all ethnically Chinese, but throughout the night, these guys kept putting anime and K-pop on the TV, making comments like, "You guys are into this SHT, right? And what he's saying here, you should understand," and, worst of all, "I've never slept with an Asian chick before," then turning to me like I was supposed to give some kind of answer. It was honestly crushing to see Miranda giggling at these comments, painting Tinder guy as just being silly or fun, because in any other context, there's no way she'd have let those kinds of stereotypes slide. Finally, Katie and I decided enough was enough. We literally had to physically pull Miranda to the front door, and after putting on our shoes, we stepped outside, thinking Miranda was right behind us as she hugged Tinder guy goodbye. The door slammed behind Katie and me instead. We immediately started knocking and shouting for Miranda, pounding on the door, jiggling the handle. After a few moments, Miranda finally opened the door and screamed, "Shut up, BTCH." Right in our faces. I just froze, staring at Katie in disbelief. I'd never heard Miranda talk to us like that in the 10 years we'd been friends. Still, we kept calling and knocking for another 15 minutes before finally heading to the car, texting and calling Miranda, hoping she'd come out. About 20 minutes later, she replied, "Give me a few minutes, Tinder guy is throwing up." So Katie and I just sat in the car for another 20 minutes, waiting. When Miranda finally came out, she was visibly upset. She got in the car and revealed that Tinder guy's friend had forced himself onto her while Tinder guy was throwing up in the washroom. My instincts kicked in instantly. I just wanted to make sure Miranda was safe, to get to a hospital, to file a police report. I tried so hard to reassure her that nothing about what happened was her fault, but she was overwhelmed, panicked, and absolutely refused to get tested or go to the police. She didn't want her parents to find out. As a survivor myself, I get exactly how scary those options are. Sometimes, the more people push, the guiltier you feel for not doing the right thing, and it just makes you shut down more. After some discussion, I didn't force her that night. We dropped Katie off and went back to my place. The next day, I called off work so I could take Miranda to get tested for STIs and get a plan B. I brought up the police again, but she refused, terrified her parents would find out. I suggested she talk to a therapist, because I could see how much she wasn't ready to open up to me or Katie, especially since Katie had blurted out in the car the previous night, "You made a lot of mistakes tonight," which was just inappropriate and not helpful. Thankfully, all her tests were negative and she started seeing a therapist regularly over the next few months. She eventually opened up to 2 of our other mutual friends, and together we became her support system. I made it clear, over and over again, that if she ever changed her mind and wanted to file a report, I'd be there with her every step of the way. About 8 months later, I was in the middle of a major breakup and hadn't seen Miranda for almost a month. She'd started seeing someone new, and I was honestly so proud of her for taking real steps to heal. Her new boyfriend encouraged her to be assertive, to express her boundaries, and for the first time in a long time, Miranda seemed more like herself, happier, more confident. No matter what happened, I never stopped supporting her, and I was grateful to see her slowly rediscover her sense of joy. One evening, while out with one of our mutual friends, I was hit with something I never expected. Our mutual revealed that Miranda harbored resentment toward me for not doing more to stop her assault, and apparently she thought I needed to take accountability by apologizing to her. I was stunned. Miranda had once told me herself that I was one of the only people who made her feel less guilty about what happened and that she was glad I was there that night. At first, I decided to wait before saying anything, figuring she needed time to feel ready to talk about it. I didn't want to throw our mutual friend under the bus or breach any confidences. So I waited, quietly anxious, until Miranda brought it up herself about a month later. When she finally did, I wanted to understand exactly how she saw things and what she believed I should have done differently in that moment. But all she could say was, "I don't know." I tried to walk her through my memory of that night, explaining how I and Katie had seen everything unfold. Miranda became adamant that I hadn't even tried to get her out. She denied ever slamming the door or yelling "shut up, BTCH" at us, insisted the door wasn't locked and said I could have just opened it, or, even if it had been locked, that I should have kicked it down or called the cops to break in. I tried to explain that Katie and I waited outside for an hour, desperately trying to reach her. She claimed she never heard us or saw us and insisted my version of the night wasn't true. I suggested that maybe we could talk to Katie to get her recollection since she was right there with me, but Miranda shot that down, saying she didn't want to talk to Katie about these kinds of things. It would just be too awkward. I even explained why we didn't call the police, even though the thought crossed our minds more than once. Miranda had spent the whole night making it clear she wanted to be there, and she was already angry at us for trying to cut the night short. It felt like we were stuck between not doing enough or overstepping what she wanted at the time. I told her I felt like her anger was misplaced. Instead of confronting her attacker, she seemed to be making me her target, especially since she had already forgiven the Tinder guy, even though he stayed friends with her attacker after everything. I made it clear I could try to be there for her, but I couldn't possibly know exactly what she needed at every moment or predict what would happen. I'm not her protector or bodyguard, and to expect that from me, to make it my responsibility to somehow foresee the future that night, was unfair. It left me feeling confused too. Why was her anger only aimed at me when, from my view, Katie had done the exact same things as I had? Even so, Miranda wasn't at all pleased by what I said. Since then, she's been very upset with me and has been telling our mutual friends that I blamed her for the assault, encouraging them to cut me off because she thinks I'm a horrible person. Thankfully, my other friends know me well and didn't believe I could ever say anything so cruel. Occasionally, they mention that Miranda still talks badly about me and even wishes ill upon me, but they're starting to distance themselves from her, each for their own reasons. I try not to let it consume me, but there are days when the weight of it feels unbearable. Update 1. 2 weeks ago, I was leaving for work when I noticed a plain white envelope wedged under my door. No return address, just my name written in neat block letters. Inside was a business card from a detective with a note: "Please call regarding an incident that occurred on, date." I stood in the hallway clutching my keys like a talisman and stared at that date until the numbers blurred. When I called, the detective asked if I'd be willing to come in for a brief interview. He wouldn't say much over the phone, just that they were looking into a series of complaints involving a group of men at an address I recognized immediately. He said my number appears repeatedly in the call logs from that night, and that there might be evidence that could help clarify the timeline. I don't know what I sounded like when I said yes. I couldn't tell if my hands were shaking from adrenaline or anger. I asked Katie to come with me. The precinct lobby felt like an airport at midnight, too bright. Everything washed in fluorescent hum. The detective was kind but clinical. He asked me to walk through what happened, slowly, in my own words. When I got to the part where the door slammed and we were outside, he paused and slid a tablet across the table. "We canvassed the neighbors. This was provided to us by the townhouse across the street," he said. The tablet showed grainy footage from a Ring camera pointed toward the sidewalk. There we were, me and Katie, banging on the door from 12:18 to 12:33 a.m., stepping back, pacing, calling, and then returning to knock again around 12:51. There was no sound at first. Then he fast-forwarded and turned the volume up. You could hear a woman's voice from behind the door in the quiet street: "Shut up, BTCH." I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. I just felt this enormous, ugly relief drop into my stomach like a stone. I remembered every second of that scene and it was right there, time-stamped, lit by a porch light and a street lamp. I took a breath so deep it hurt. The detective asked if Miranda had ever filed a report. I said no. He nodded, made a note, and told me I wasn't the first person they'd spoken to. Another woman had come forward last month with a story about the same friend. That's how the canvas started. That's how my number popped up. Before we left, he gave me his card and told me if Miranda ever changed her mind, he'd be the contact. I left with rubber legs. I didn't know what to do with the footage. I didn't want to weaponize it, but I also couldn't live with the version of me Miranda had been repeating to everyone. I texted her and asked if she'd meet me for tea. She said yes but gave me an end time before she even said hello. She looked different, tighter somehow, like a string pulled so hard it was about to snap. She sat down, crossed her arms and said, "What do you want?" I told her a detective had contacted me and that there was footage from that night. She stared at me blankly. I said I wouldn't send it to her if she didn't want to see it, that I only wanted her to know it existed. She said, "If this is some kind of sick gotcha," and I just put the card on the table and slid it to her. The detective's name was there, printed in blue ink. She reached for it and her hands were shaking. "Why now?" she whispered. "Because another woman reported him," is how I answered. Miranda flinched like I'd slapped her. She closed her eyes and said she couldn't deal with this and left so fast her chair scraped the floor and made everyone look. That night, her boyfriend texted me from her phone, "This obsession with clearing your name is disgusting. Miranda is healing. If you had any compassion you'd stop." I didn't answer. He called twice. I didn't answer that either. At 2:11 a.m., my phone rang again from a blocked number. This time, it was Miranda. Her voice was so small I barely recognized it. "Can I come over?" she asked. She was outside my building when I got downstairs, no jacket, eyes red, clutching the detective's card. She looked at me and said, "I told him you were lying because I couldn't stand that the person I picked over you was the one who hurt me." She said it flatly, like a confession, and then she cried. She told me her boyfriend had pushed her to name what happened and hold people accountable, but it turned into naming me because I was easier to reach and easier to punish. He hated that I was the one she always called. He said if I kept letting you rewrite the story he was done, she said, making quotation marks in the air like the gesture itself disgusted her. I was so tired of feeling like I didn't do anything right. So I picked a villain I could get to. We sat on my stoop for a long time. A bus hissed at the corner and a raccoon knocked over a trash bin like comic relief. Miranda asked if the detective was real. I said yes. She asked if the footage was real. I said yes. She nodded, wiped her face with the back of her hand, and said, "I want to talk to him. Can you come with me?" We went the next afternoon. Katie met us there. Miranda brought her therapist's business card and a notebook with dates and times she'd written in neat, tight handwriting. In the interview room, she kept her eyes on a speck on the wall as she told her story. She didn't look at me. When she got to the part where she opened the door and yelled, she squeezed her eyes shut and said, "I don't want to hear it." The detective said she didn't have to listen to the audio, it was there if she ever did. He explained options in plain language with no pressure. When he asked if she knew the name of the friend, she said it immediately. For a second I saw the Miranda I knew, a clear voice cutting through fog. After, we stood out on the sidewalk in the weak winter sun. Miranda's boyfriend texted her while we were there. She turned her phone face down and said, "I think I have to break up with him." It sounded like she was trying the sentence on for size, seeing if it fit. She asked me if I could walk her home. We didn't talk about the old fight or the gossip. We talked about stupid things, banh mi places we liked, whether our neighborhood coffee shop secretly put crack in their cold brew, a dog wearing a sweater that didn't want to cross the street. Halfway to her place, she said, "I told people you blamed me because I was afraid someone would say it for real. I'm sorry. I didn't say it's okay. I just told her I hurt her." That night she sent me a message that wasn't a manifesto or a novel, just, "Thank you for picking up." She blocked her boyfriend the next morning. He tried to reach me again from a different number, and I blocked that too. A few of the people who'd gone cold suddenly popped back in my life with breezy "How have you been?" texts that felt like knocking on a door after the lights were off. I didn't answer those. I'm not interested in playing bouncer for my own reputation. A week later, the detective called to let me know they were linking Miranda's report to the other case. They were careful not to promise anything. He said there may be more interviews, and that we might be asked to testify if it moves forward. I hung up and stared at the wall, thinking about voices caught accidentally by a doorbell camera and how something so mundane could hold so much weight. Katie came over that night with frozen dumplings and chili crisp. We ate in silence for a bit and then laughed at nothing until our stomachs hurt. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if charges will stick or if we'll end up in some fluorescent room again telling strangers about the worst night of someone's life. I do know this, when Miranda stepped into the crosswalk outside the precinct and the light changed, she squeezed my hand once, quick and hard, and then let go. That felt like the first honest thing between us in months. Not a promise to go back to how it was. Just a small movement forward, against the current. Update 2. 3 days after the detective's call, Miranda texted me at 8:12 a.m. He asked if I'd do a recorded call. I stared at that sentence on my screen like it was a jump I wasn't sure the ground would meet. I told her I'd come. The interview room was the same beige box with a buzzing vent. The detective set a small black recorder on the table beside a coffee ring that was exactly the size of a Pringles lid. He spoke gently and didn't raise his eyes when he said the instructions. Keep him talking. Don't threaten him. Don't warn him. Use his name. It felt like being handed a script where your only lines are versions of the truth. Miranda's hand shook as she dialed. I watched her thumb hover over the call button, then land. It rang 3 times. He picked up on the fourth. Yo. She said his name. Not the nickname from that night. His full name, like a teacher taking attendance. It's me. Silence. Then, what do you want? I can't stop thinking about what you did, she said. No apology in the sentence. It was all spine. He exhaled into the phone like he'd been rehearsing too. We were all drunk. You wanted me to, she cut him off. I said stop. You said wait, not stop, he said. You could hear a TV in the background and the scrape of something on a counter. Look, I felt bad you cried. I told you that. I told you I was sorry the next day. The detective scribbled a note and slid it toward Miranda. She glanced down and read the word out loud, casual, like she had just remembered to ask about milk. Bathroom. Do you remember why Tinder guy wasn't there? The line crackled. He lowered his voice. Man was sick. I told you to relax. Why are you doing this to me? I told you no. Her voice broke on the last sound and she swallowed it. You hurt me. Are you recording this? He said, suddenly sharp. The detective shook his head at us even though the question wasn't for him. Don't call me again, the guy said, and hung up. The room stayed quiet for a beat too long. Then the detective reached over and stopped the recorder like he was taking his foot off a pedal. That helps, he said, careful with the words. It's not nothing. Miranda stared at the tabletop and traced the coffee ring with her pinky finger as if completing the circle would open a trapdoor and drop her out of the day. On the way out, the receptionist, gray sweater, chipped coral nail polish, offered us butterscotch candies from a bowl. Miranda took two and stuck both in her mouth, crunching like she could grind the taste out of time. That night, Tinder guy DM'd me on Instagram from a new account with 3 followers and no posts. This is getting blown up. You don't know what you're doing. There was a voice memo I didn't ask for. It was 38 seconds of him explaining how his friend crossed a line but was good at heart, how Miranda wasn't exactly saying no and how if this ruins my life too I won't forgive you. He said my name at the end like it was evidence. I forwarded it to the detective and blocked him. 2 mornings later, Miranda knocked on my door at 7:30 holding a bag of scallion pancakes her mom had made. She hadn't told them everything yet, she said, just that something bad happened and she had to talk to police. Her mom came with her, sat on my couch, and arranged the food on paper plates like it was a holiday. She kept fussing with napkins, smoothing the edges, aligning them, then aligning them again. We are here, she said, and I realized it was the first time I'd heard Miranda's mom speak to me in English. She switched to Mandarin with Miranda and the music of it was both home and knife. I caught only pieces. Doctor, truth, careful, her dad didn't come upstairs. He waited in the car, she said, because if he came up he'd try to fix it with his hands and that never ends well. On their way out, her mom stopped at my door and took my wrist in both her hands. Thank you, she said, and then, sorry, for a thing she didn't do. That afternoon, the detective called again. We need to talk to Tinder guy, he said, and the way the words landed made my stomach go hot like I'd swallowed a match. Miranda nodded when I told her, if he wants to be a witness for his friend, he can be one for me too, she said, and I watched a thin bright line of anger cross her face like the first light under a door. The intimidation started small and stupid. A throwaway Reddit account commented on an old photo of mine with a broken heart emoji and the words clout chaser. A number I didn't recognize texted hope your job knows you're a liar at 11:04 p.m. There was a DM to Katie with a PDF attached labeled defamation basics and a winky face. We screenshotted everything and sent it to the detective. He called back almost instantly. Save it. Don't engage, he said. If it escalates, it turns into a different charge. It escalated the next morning at 6:13 a.m. with one line from a new number, talk to cops again and we'll see you outside work. It felt like my whole apartment shrank down to the footprint of my body. I forwarded it, turned my phone face down, and stood very still in my kitchen watching the kettle steam like it might blow. The detective replied in all caps, need the number, and 20 minutes later he called to tell us they were adding it to the file as witness tampering. Do you feel safe at home? He asked. I wanted to be brave, to say yes. I said, mostly, and he connected us to victim services for a safety plan anyway. A woman named Alana told me to vary my route to and from work and to let my building's front desk know. I don't have a front desk, so I told the woman at the bodega downstairs my situation in the shorthand that makes it survivable. She tapped the baseball bat under the counter and said, I see anyone wait, I call. A week later, the ADA's office asked us to come in. The prosecutor was younger than I expected, with a halo of frizz around her bun and an anxious smile that felt like solidarity. She had a yellow legal pad covered in slanted handwriting and a sticky note on the corner that said Ring Audio with a star. She ran us through what testimony could look like. She didn't promise anything, not outcome or timing or whether a grand jury would view the case. We may not get his words into the record exactly how he said them on that call, she said, but the pattern matters. The corroboration matters. The fact that you knocked for 15 minutes matters. She wasn't selling us hope. She was putting bricks in our hands. When we left the office, the courthouse steps were slick with a drizzle that wasn't committed enough to be rain. A woman in a camel coat and hard-set mouth stood at the bottom of the stairs with a man in a navy fleece, and the way they were scanning faces made my lungs get small. The woman stepped forward, blocking our path the way people do when they've been practicing in the mirror. "Are you Miranda?" she asked. Her voice had the cadence of the suburbs. She said Miranda's name wrong. Miranda's spine went up straight. "Yes," she said, pronouncing it for her. The woman nodded like she was being very reasonable. "You are ruining a good person's life." Then she said her son's name and my stomach flipped because it was the name from the recorded call. "He is sick over this. This is a misunderstanding that you are blowing out of." Miranda didn't let her finish. "Your son hurt me," she said, voice level, each word said on the step like a stone you couldn't kick loose. The woman blinked the way people blink when they realize their script doesn't account for the other person being real. The man in the fleece put a hand on her elbow and murmured something, and they stepped back. The woman's perfume hung in the air like a second presence, jasmine and headache. No one yelled. No one pushed. It was somehow worse for being quiet. That afternoon a subpoena hit my inbox like a trumpet. It wanted my phone records, location data, copies of any messages between me and Miranda for a 2-month window. I emailed my boss from a draft I'd been writing and rewriting for a week. She called me, not to pry, just to ask what I needed. I told her I might have to be out for a day here and there. She told me to take more if I needed it and to stop sending emails past 6 p.m. "I mean it," she said, not performative. I got off the phone and cried into my freezer door until a bag of peas fell on my foot and got me moving again. That night, Katie and I took the long way home from the grocery store and ended up cutting past the park, where a group of teenagers was practicing a TikTok dance under a streetlight. We stopped like we were watching a tiny play. One of them noticed and grinned at us and then did the move even bigger, like life keeps insisting on itself even when you think it should be quieter. Miranda texted me a photo around midnight, her open journal, a receipt from the pharmacy stapled to the page, the date circled in blue ink. "I found this," she wrote. "I forgot I kept it." It lined up with our timeline down to the minute she ordered the food she had used as a reason to stay. Proof you don't think you're keeping becomes the kind of proof that holds everything up. The next morning, the detective called. "We took him in," he said. There was static on the line that made me think of an old radio trying to find a song. "He asked for a lawyer right away. That's his right." He cleared his throat. "We're moving this to the DA now. Don't post. Don't celebrate. Just keep breathing." The universe has a dark sense of humor. On my walk to work that day, I passed a construction site where someone had spray painted "Be Kind" on a plank leaning against a chain link fence. Below it, in a different hand, "Or don't, IDK. I took a picture and sent it to Miranda with nothing else. She sent back the raccoon emoji. She told her parents everything that night. She asked me to sit with them because she didn't want to watch their faces alone. Her dad sat on the edge of the couch like it could buck him. He didn't speak for a long time. When he did, it was English made careful by use. "Your life is yours," he said to her, and then he turned to me and said, "And you did not fail our daughter." He didn't look at me like I had a halo. He looked at me like I was a person in a room with him and we were all trying not to drown. It was more grace than I knew how to hold. The men who had taken their distance when Miranda started telling people I'd failed her sent me glossy apologies that read like audition monologues. I didn't respond. Miranda did. "She picked me up," she wrote to one of them, and the sentence felt like a key in a lock that never used to turn. "Last night, we walked past the precinct to get noodles and on our way back a bus let off a gust of warm air that lifted the hair at Miranda's temple. At the crosswalk, before the light changed, she slipped 2 fingers into my palm and squeezed once, quick and hard. I squeezed back, and then she let go. We didn't talk about court or calls or anything with a capital letter. We talked about whether thunderheads look like mountains and the rumor that the Good Banh Mi place was closing and if the dog in the puffer jacket had finally learned not to bark at the recycling bins. I don't know if a grand jury will vote a true bill. I don't know if I'll end up sitting on a wooden bench under 2 white lights, knees cold, telling this story to people who could be anywhere else. I do know that when the line went dead after the recorded call, Miranda looked up at me for the first time all day and said, "He heard me." It was not relief and not victory. It was recognition. It was the smallest possible something that still counts as something, and right now that's how we're moving, step by step, across a street neither of us chose, toward whatever comes next.